Some say revenge is a dish best served cold, but vengeance born in the Cold War burns with a fire that decades cannot extinguish. They thought they buried her in Berlin, 1988, left her for dead among the bodies of friends and colleagues who weren't as lucky. A midnight operation gone catastrophically wrong betrayed from within. 6 agents dead, 3 local assets executed, and 1 survivor, carrying the weight of ghosts whose whispers never fade. For 37 years, she's waited, watched, gathered threads of a conspiracy that spans continents and corrupted souls, built a life of careful anonymity while hunting shadows from another era. Now, in a modest boxing gym in Boston, time collapses as she stands face to face with a dead man walking a former KGB operative with a new name, a new face, and old blood on his hands. The man who destroyed everything she held dear. The bell is about to ring on the most dangerous bout of her life, and this time, only one of them will walk away. Elizabeth Morgan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Beverly Hills mansion, gazing at the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Her hand instinctively rested on her 6-month pregnant belly, feeling the gentle kicks of her unborn child. At 32, she had everything most people dreamed of: a successful career she had put on hold, a marriage to one of America's most powerful billionaires, and now, a baby on the way. Is everything ready for tonight? Maxwell Morgan's voice broke through her reverie. At 45, Maxwell cut an imposing figure in his tailored tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair and chiseled features, making him look like he'd stepped off the cover of Fortune magazine. Yes, the staff has prepared everything according to your specifications, Elizabeth replied, turning to face her husband of 3 years. The guest list includes all the major donors you wanted. Maxwell barely glanced at her as he adjusted his platinum cufflinks. A wedding gift from Elizabeth. You're wearing that? His eyes flicked dismissively over her elegant midnight blue gown, specially designed to flatter her pregnant figure. Elizabeth's smile faltered. I thought it was appropriate. Is there a problem? It's fine, he said with a shrug. Just try not to tire yourself out. These events are important for business. I need you to be present, not hiding away because your feet hurt or whatever pregnancy complaint you might have tonight. The casual cruelty in his tone wasn't new, but it still stung. Over the past few months, since her pregnancy had begun to show, Maxwell had grown increasingly cold, his affection replaced by irritation and distance. I'll be the perfect hostess, as always, Elizabeth assured him, keeping her voice steady. She had long mastered the art of hiding her hurt behind a poised smile, a skill that had become essential in her marriage to Maxwell. The annual charity gala hosted at their estate was the most prestigious event on the social calendar, attracting celebrities, politicians, and business titans alike. As the founder and CEO of Morgan Luxury Resorts, Maxwell had built an empire of high-end hotels and resorts spanning 6 continents. The charity gala, ostensibly raising funds for children's education, was more about networking and power plays than philanthropy, something Elizabeth had come to understand all too well. As guests began arriving in their limousines and luxury cars, Elizabeth took her position beside Maxwell, greeting each visitor with practiced grace. She noticed how his demeanor transformed in public: charming, attentive, even occasionally placing a protective hand on her back, playing the role of the proud, expectant father. Elizabeth, darling, you're absolutely glowing, exclaimed Vivian Harlow, wife of a prominent film producer. When are you due again? Early October, Elizabeth answered with a genuine smile. We're very excited. As you should be. Vivian squeezed her hand. First babies are special. How is Maxwell handling the impending fatherhood? Before Elizabeth could respond, Maxwell smoothly interjected. I've had the nursery designed by the same architect who did the Moroccan royal family's palace. Nothing but the best for the Morgan heir. He flashed his camera-ready smile, but Elizabeth noted it didn't reach his eyes. The evening progressed with Elizabeth making small talk with guests, accepting congratulations on her pregnancy, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. By 11, her back ached and her feet throbbed in her designer heels, but she maintained her composure, knowing Maxwell's expectations. "Have you seen Maxwell?" she asked one of the servers after realizing she hadn't spotted her husband for nearly half an hour. "I believe Mr. Morgan went to his office, ma'am," the young man replied discreetly. "He was with Ms. Winters from marketing." Amanda Winters. Something cold settled in Elizabeth's stomach. The stunning brunette had been hired as marketing director 6 months ago, and Elizabeth had noticed the lingering glances, the inside jokes, the late-night emergency meetings. She had dismissed her suspicions as pregnancy paranoia, but now— "Thank you," she murmured, making her way through the crowd toward Maxwell's home office. As she approached the partially closed door, voices drifted out, Maxwell's deep timbre and a woman's sultry laugh. Elizabeth hesitated, her heart pounding. She wasn't someone who eavesdropped, but something primal urged her to listen. "How much longer do we have to keep up this charade?" Amanda's voice was clearly audible. "I'm tired of hiding, Max. Just until after the baby is born," Maxwell replied, his tone irritated. "My lawyers say it's cleaner that way. The prenup has clauses about children." Elizabeth's blood turned to ice. "She's getting suspicious," Amanda continued. "Yesterday she asked me about that weekend in Aspen when you said you were at a conference." Maxwell laughed, a cold sound that Elizabeth had never heard before. "Elizabeth sees what she wants to see. Always has. You think she really believed I married her for love? Her family name was useful for certain business connections. Plus, she's presentable and came from the right background. The perfect corporate wife. And the perfect corporate baby mama." Amanda's tone was mocking. "A necessary inconvenience. Once the kid is born, I'll file for divorce. She'll get the standard package, enough to look generous to the public, but nothing that would dent my actual fortune. Maybe a house in Connecticut or something suitably domestic." "And custody?" Amanda asked. "I'll let her have primary custody. What would I do with a child? But having an heir is important for the Morgan legacy. Besides, the board members love a family man." Elizabeth felt the room spin. 3 years of marriage, the excitement when she told him about the pregnancy, the nursery plans, all a calculated business decision. Unable to contain herself any longer, she pushed the door open. Maxwell and Amanda sprang apart, though not looking particularly guilty. Amanda sat perched on Maxwell's desk, her red dress hiked up, while Maxwell stood between her legs, one hand on her thigh. "Elizabeth," Maxwell said, annoyed rather than embarrassed, "you should be with our guests." "How long?" Elizabeth's voice came out stronger than she expected. "How long has this been going on?" Maxwell sighed, straightening his tie. "Does it matter?" "Since before your pregnancy," Amanda supplied with a smirk. "Almost a year now." Elizabeth looked at the woman, younger, not visibly more beautiful, but with a hardness that Elizabeth had never possessed. "And you're just okay with this being with a married man, breaking up a family?" Amanda slid off the desk, smoothing her dress. "Family, please. You're a business transaction that came with an inconvenient biological function. Don't be naive." "Elizabeth." Maxwell's tone shifted to one of practiced patience, as if speaking to a difficult child. "Let's not make a scene. We have guests. We can discuss this tomorrow." "Discuss what?" Elizabeth's voice rose. "Your plans to divorce me after I give birth to your heir. Your affair with your marketing director. Which part should we schedule for tomorrow's discussion?" Maxwell's face hardened, the public mask dropping completely. "Lower your voice. You're being hysterical." "Hysterical." Elizabeth laughed, a sound bordering on a sob. "I just discovered my husband has been cheating on me our entire marriage and plans to discard me once I've served my purpose. How exactly should I be reacting?" "This is why I can't stand pregnant women," Maxwell muttered to Amanda, who snickered. "The hormones make them completely irrational." Elizabeth stared at him, seeing for the first time the complete stranger she had married. You never wanted this baby. You never wanted me. Maxwell checked his watch impatiently. What I want is for you to pull yourself together and return to the gala. We have important people out there. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. Remember who you are, Elizabeth. You're a Morgan now, and Morgans don't make scenes. You have responsibilities. Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes. Responsibilities to a husband who just admitted I'm nothing but a business transaction. Oh, for God's sake. Maxwell stepped closer, his voice low but venomous. Look at yourself. 6 months pregnant, and already you've lost your figure. Did you really think you could keep a man like me interested when you look like this? He gestured dismissively at her pregnant belly. You're a walking incubator at this point. At least have the dignity to fulfill that role without the dramatics. The words hit Elizabeth like physical blows. Amanda watched with undisguised amusement. You're nothing without the Morgan name, Maxwell continued coldly. Your little charity work, your social standing, the respect you receive, it all comes from me. So dry your eyes, put on some more makeup, and get back out there before people notice your absence. Something broke inside Elizabeth, not just her heart, but the chains of insecurity and dependence that had gradually tightened around her during their marriage. No, she said quietly. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said no. Elizabeth's voice strengthened. I won't go back out there and pretend everything is fine. I won't stand beside you while you lie to everyone. And I certainly won't let my child be raised by a man who sees them as nothing but a business asset. Maxwell's face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake. My mistake was believing you ever loved me, Elizabeth replied, backing toward the door. But I won't make another one by staying. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it, Maxwell threatened. I'll make sure you get nothing in the divorce. Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. At this moment, nothing seems like a fair price to be free of you. She turned to leave, but Maxwell grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. You don't walk away from me. I decide when this is over. Let go of me, Elizabeth said, trying to pull away, fear mixing with her anger. You're embarrassing yourself, Maxwell hissed, tightening his grip. After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me by throwing a tantrum at our biggest event of the year. Let go! Elizabeth's voice rose as she struggled against his grip. Everything okay in here? A server had appeared at the door, his eyes widening at the scene before him. Maxwell released Elizabeth immediately, his public mask slipping back into place. My wife isn't feeling well. Pregnancy issues. Please escort her upstairs to rest. The server hesitated, looking uncertainly between them. Actually, Maxwell's tone shifted to one of concerned husband, though his eyes remained cold. Please have security help my wife to our private car. She needs to go to the hospital for a checkup. Precautionary. Of course. Before Elizabeth could protest, Maxwell leaned in, whispering in her ear. Make another scene, and I'll make sure everyone knows you had a mental breakdown. Who do you think they'll believe, me or the hormonal pregnant woman? Minutes later, Elizabeth found herself being escorted from her own home by 2 security guards. Maxwell having smoothly informed nearby guests that his poor wife was experiencing pregnancy complications and needed immediate medical attention. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morgan, whispered the younger security guard as they reached the driveway. We have to follow orders. But this isn't right. It's okay. Sam, Elizabeth replied, recognizing the guard who had always been kind to her. It's not your fault. Let me at least call you a proper car, he offered, discreetly slipping her his phone. Not the company car. Mr. Morgan can track those. Elizabeth took the phone with trembling hand as rain began to fall, quickly soaking through her expensive gown. Standing in the driveway of her own mansion, locked out of her home, she suddenly realized how completely isolated she had become. Maxwell had gradually separated her from her friends, her work colleagues, even her family. Family. The thought struck her like lightning. Despite Maxwell's efforts, there was one relationship he had never managed to sever, mainly because the person had been too powerful for even Maxwell to manipulate or intimidate. With rain streaming down her face, mingling with her tears, Elizabeth dialed the one number she knew by heart, the person she had been too proud to turn to until now. "Alexander, it's Elizabeth. I need your help." As the taxi arrived, Elizabeth looked back at the mansion gleaming with lights, the silhouettes of wealthy guests visible through the windows, all oblivious to the real drama unfolding. Inside her purse, she discovered a photograph that must have fallen from Maxwell's desk. Maxwell and Amanda kissing on a yacht, dated just weeks after Elizabeth had announced her pregnancy. Rain-soaked and heartbroken, Elizabeth clutched her belly protectively. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered to her unborn child. "But not for long. Uncle Alexander is coming, and heaven help Maxwell Morgan when he does." The doorman at Elizabeth's old apartment building did a double take when he saw her approaching in a soaked designer gown, her makeup streaked by rain and tears. "Mrs. Morgan, is everything all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "It's Ms. Crawford again. Tony," Elizabeth corrected gently, using her maiden name for the first time in 3 years. "And no, everything is not all right, but it will be." She was grateful she had never rented out her pre-marriage apartment, keeping it as a personal retreat despite Maxwell's insistence that it was unnecessary sentimentality. Now, it was her only sanctuary. The apartment felt smaller than she remembered, but comfortingly familiar. Elizabeth kicked off her ruined designer heels and peeled off her wet gown, wrapping herself in the soft robe that still hung on the bathroom door. She sat on the edge of her old bed, phone in hand, and waited. It didn't take long. Her credit cards were declined when she tried to order food. Her phone began buzzing with messages from Maxwell's assistant, not Maxwell himself, informing her that for her own protection during this difficult emotional time, her access to their joint accounts had been temporarily restricted. Elizabeth laughed bitterly. Maxwell was nothing if not efficient. He was cutting her off, just as he'd threatened. By morning, she discovered that her personal account, the one she'd maintained separately throughout their marriage, had been drained, legal, since Maxwell had convinced her to add him as a joint holder in case of emergency. Her phone rang again, displaying her obstetrician's office. With a sense of dread, she answered. "Ms. Crawford, this is Dr. Patel's office. I'm afraid we've been informed that your insurance coverage has been terminated. Your appointment next week will need to be paid out of pocket, or we can refer you to a clinic that offers sliding scale payments." Elizabeth closed her eyes, absorbing this new blow. Maxwell was not just cutting her off financially. He was sending a clear message: defy me, and I will take everything, including your prenatal care. A knock at the door startled her. Cautiously, she approached and checked the peephole, then flung the door open with a cry of relief. Alexander Crawford stood in the hallway, his imposing 6'3" frame filling the doorway. At 38, he was the antithesis of Maxwell's polished, old-money aesthetic. Alexander's success was new, hard-won, and entirely self-made. As the founder and CEO of Crawford Tech, he had revolutionized cybersecurity and earned his first billion before turning 35. "Lizzie," he said simply, opening his arms. Elizabeth fell into her brother's embrace, finally allowing herself to fully break down. Alexander held her tightly, one hand protectively on her back, the other cradling her head as she sobbed against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured. "Both of you." After she had calmed down and changed into comfortable clothes, Elizabeth sat across from Alexander at her small kitchen table, recounting the previous night's events. Alexander's expression darkened with each detail, his hands clenching into fists when she described Maxwell's cruel words and manhandling. "I'm going to destroy him," Alexander stated, his voice eerily calm. "Not just financially, but completely. Alexander, he's powerful. His family has connections everywhere. Judges, politicians, media. So do I, Alexander replied, a dangerous glint in his eyes. And unlike Maxwell, I didn't inherit my power. I built it. That makes me much more dangerous. He opened his laptop, typing rapidly. Morgan Luxury Resorts, publicly traded, but the Morgan family maintains controlling interest through various holdings. Interesting financial structure. He looked up. Did you ever sign a prenuptial agreement? Elizabeth nodded miserably. It was presented to me the day before our wedding. Maxwell said it was just a formality, that his family insisted. It seemed reasonable at the time. Let me see it. She retrieved the document from a folder in her desk drawer, one of the few legal papers she had kept a copy of, on the insistence of her friend Rachel, who was a lawyer. Alexander scanned it, his frown deepening. This is predatory. Lizzie, these clauses about mental instability and abandonment of marital home, they're designed to leave you with nothing if he can portray you as unstable. Which is exactly what he started doing last night, Elizabeth said bitterly, telling everyone I was having some kind of breakdown. Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed Elizabeth the screen. A news alert from a gossip website, Billionaire Maxwell Morgan's pregnant wife hospitalized after emotional episode at charity gala. He works fast, Elizabeth whispered, sinking deeper into her chair. So do I, Alexander replied, already dialing. Rachel, it's Alexander Crawford. I need your help. My sister is in trouble. Within hours, Elizabeth's apartment was transformed into a war room. Rachel Chen, Elizabeth's friend from college and now a partner at a prestigious law firm, arrived with boxes of legal documents and a determined expression. Following her was David Martinez, Alexander's head of security, a former FBI agent whose quiet demeanor belied his ruthless efficiency. First things first, Rachel said, taking charge. We need to protect you and the baby. Maxwell has already begun a smear campaign suggesting you're mentally unstable. We need to counter that immediately. How? Elizabeth asked, feeling overwhelmed. Medical documentation, Rachel replied. Today, we're getting you a complete physical and psychological evaluation from independent doctors, ones with no connection to Maxwell. David will arrange secure transportation and ensure no one follows you. Alexander nodded approvingly. Meanwhile, I'll have my team begin a deep dive into Maxwell's finances. Morgan Luxury Resorts has expanded aggressively in the past 2 years. That kind of rapid growth often involves cutting corners. I might have something that could help, Elizabeth said hesitantly. She retrieved her laptop and opened a password-protected folder. I used to help Maxwell review some of the charitable foundation's activities. Some of the numbers never added up, but when I questioned it, he said it was just complex accounting. Rachel leaned forward, examining the spreadsheets. This is, interesting. The charity appears to be moving significant funds through offshore entities before they reach actual charitable causes. Money laundering, Alexander suggested. Possibly tax evasion at minimum, Rachel confirmed. We'll need more evidence, but it's a start. As they strategized, Elizabeth's phone rang again. Maxwell's private number. She showed the screen to the others. Put it on speaker, Alexander instructed. Let's hear what he has to say, Elizabeth answered, activating the speakerphone. Hello, Maxwell. Elizabeth. His voice was cool, controlled. I assume you've had time to reconsider your behavior? My behavior, Elizabeth repeated incredulously. You caused quite a scene last night. Fortunately, I was able to minimize the damage. I've told everyone you're resting under medical care, dealing with pregnancy-related anxiety. How considerate of you, Elizabeth replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Maxwell sighed audibly. This rebellious attitude doesn't suit you. Elizabeth, here's what's going to happen. You'll return home today. We'll present a united front to the public, and after the baby is born, we'll quietly separate. You'll receive a generous settlement if you cooperate. Continue this. Whatever this is, and you'll get nothing. Actually, Maxwell, Elizabeth said, drawing strength from Alexander's encouraging nod. I won't be returning. I've consulted a lawyer about divorce proceedings. A pause and then a cold laugh. A lawyer with what money? Elizabeth, in case you haven't noticed, your financial situation has changed drastically since last night. She doesn't need money. Alexander cut in, his voice sharp. She has me. Another, longer pause. Alexander Crawford, Maxwell finally said, his tone shifting subtly. I wasn't aware you and your sister were still in contact. Surprise, Alexander replied dryly. Family reunions can be so unexpected. This doesn't concern you, Crawford. My pregnant sister being emotionally abused, financially cut off, and publicly slandered by her husband. That very much concerns me. Maxwell's voice hardened. You're making a mistake involving yourself in this. I have resources you can't imagine. Funny, Alexander replied. I was about to say the same to you. Here's what's going to happen. Morgan, you're going to retract your public statements about Elizabeth's mental health, restore her access to funds for medical care, and prepare for the most expensive divorce in history. Or what? Maxwell challenged. Or I'll show the world who Maxwell Morgan really is. Starting with the creative accounting in your charitable foundation, the silence that followed told them they'd struck a nerve. You're bluffing, Maxwell finally said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Try me, Alexander replied evenly. One more thing. If any harm comes to Elizabeth or her baby, either directly or through your actions, there won't be a corner of this earth where you can hide from me. Elizabeth ended the call, her hand trembling slightly. He won't back down easily. Maxwell hates losing more than anything. So do I, Alexander replied grimly. The difference is, I fight fair until someone gives me a reason not to. Maxwell gave me that reason the moment he hurt you. Over the next weeks, the battle escalated. True to form, Maxwell didn't retract his statements about Elizabeth's mental health. Instead, sources close to the couple began leaking stories about her alleged history of emotional instability and jealous outbursts. In response, Rachel arranged for the results of Elizabeth's psychological evaluation to be forwarded to several reputable journalists, along with statements from longtime friends attesting to her character. It wasn't enough to completely counter Maxwell's narrative, but it created reasonable doubt. Meanwhile, Alexander's team of financial investigators uncovered disturbing patterns in Maxwell's business dealings. The charitable foundation was indeed being used to shelter income and avoid taxes, while several of the newest Morgan resorts had been built using substandard materials despite luxury pricing. We've found something else, David reported one evening, placing a folder on Elizabeth's kitchen table. Morgan has been systematically underpaying his foreign workers at resorts in Southeast Asia and the Caribbean, while falsifying documents to show compliance with labor laws. Alexander studied the evidence, his expression darkening. This could destroy the Morgan brand if it went public. Luxury customers don't like discovering their pampered vacations are built on exploitation. There's more, David continued. We've been monitoring Amanda Winters. She and Maxwell have been meeting with investors, planning to sell off underperforming Morgan properties at inflated values before the construction issues become public. Elizabeth, now 7 months pregnant, felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. I lived with him for 3 years and never saw this side of him. How could I have been so blind? Maxwell is a practiced predator, Rachel said gently. He targets people who see the best in others. That's not a weakness. Lizzie, it's what makes you who you are. We've got enough to start making moves, Alexander declared, but we need something definitive, something even Maxwell's expensive lawyers can't explain away. Elizabeth sat up straighter, a memory surfacing. Wait, there might be something. Maxwell keeps a private safe in his home office, behind the Rothko painting. He thinks I don't know about it, but I saw him access it once when he thought I was asleep. He stores a black USB drive there, along with some documents. He's paranoid about digital security and keeps his most sensitive information offline. Alexander and David exchanged looks. Getting into the Morgan estate won't be easy, David cautioned. Their security is top-notch. Not for everyone, Elizabeth said thoughtfully. I just remembered, I'm still on the board of the Morgan Foundation. The annual fiscal review meeting is next week, and it's held at the mansion. Maxwell can't remove me without raising questions, and he'd never expect me to actually show up. It's risky, Rachel warned. If you're caught searching his office. I won't be, Elizabeth said with newfound determination. I was invisible to Maxwell long before our confrontation. His arrogance will make me invisible again. The plan was meticulous. Elizabeth would attend the board meeting as the dutiful wife attempting reconciliation. With most staff and security focused on the meeting in the main hall, she would slip away to access Maxwell's office. David would monitor security remotely, having hacked into the estate's systems, while Alexander waited nearby with a legal team, ready to move once they had the evidence. The day of the meeting arrived. Elizabeth felt strangely calm as her car passed through the gates of the estate she had once called home. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a conservative maternity dress in soft gray, her hair pulled back in a simple chignon, minimal makeup, the image of a woman seeking forgiveness, not war. Maxwell couldn't completely hide his shock when she entered the boardroom, though he quickly masked it with a cold smile. Elizabeth, what a surprise. I'm still on the board. Maxwell, she replied softly, playing her role. I take my responsibilities seriously. The other board members, mostly older men from Maxwell's social circle, seemed uncomfortable but relieved by the apparently civil interaction. The meeting began, with Maxwell presenting an overly optimistic projection of the foundation's impact. Halfway through, Elizabeth excused herself, one hand on her pregnant belly. Please continue without me. Baby is pressing on my bladder. Several board members chuckled sympathetically, while Maxwell barely acknowledged her departure. Once in the hallway, Elizabeth changed direction, moving swiftly toward Maxwell's private office. Security camera in the west hallway is looping previous footage. David's voice came through her discreet earpiece. You have approximately 8 minutes before the loop might be noticed. Elizabeth entered the office, making straight for the Rothko painting. She swung it aside, revealing the safe behind. Her hands trembled slightly as she inputted the combination. Their wedding date. Maxwell's predictable sentimentality serving her purpose now. The safe door swung open. Inside lay exactly what she'd described. A black USB drive, a stack of documents, and surprisingly, a small velvet box containing a diamond necklace that Elizabeth recognized as the one Maxwell had supposedly given her for their first anniversary. Clearly, it had been intended for Amanda all along. Elizabeth grabbed the USB and documents, securing them in her purse. As she closed the safe and replaced the painting, she heard a voice from the doorway. Looking for something? Elizabeth whirled around to find Amanda Winters leaning against the doorframe, a smug smile on her face. Amanda, Elizabeth said, fighting to keep her voice steady. The meeting was boring me. Thought I'd take a walk down memory lane. In Maxwell's private office, behind his favorite painting, Amanda stepped into the room. I'm not as gullible as you. Elizabeth. David, I have a situation, Elizabeth whispered, knowing the microphone would pick it up. Talking to yourself now? Amanda moved closer. Maybe Maxwell's right about your mental state. What do you want? Amanda, Elizabeth asked, trying to position herself toward the door. To see the great Elizabeth Crawford Morgan reduced to sneaking around like a thief, Amanda replied, her eyes glittering with malice. You know, Maxwell and I laugh about how easy it was to fool you. All those late nights at the office, weekend conferences, even that business trip to Tokyo when we were actually in Bali. Elizabeth felt a fresh wave of hurt, but pushed it aside. She needed to escape with the evidence. Congratulations, she said flatly. You've won. Maxwell is all yours. Not quite yet. Amanda's smile turned predatory. Maxwell still has concerns about how you might impact his reputation. But don't worry. After your unfortunate accident today, trespassing where you shouldn't be, overcome by emotion and falling down those steep back stairs, well, everyone will understand the tragic outcome. Elizabeth's blood ran cold as she realized Amanda was positioning herself between her and the only exit. She instinctively backed up, one hand protectively covering her belly. "You'd harm a pregnant woman," Elizabeth asked, trying to buy time. "I'd eliminate a problem," Amanda corrected coldly. "Nothing personal." As Amanda moved toward her, Elizabeth desperately looked for an escape route. Suddenly, the office door swung wider, and a familiar figure appeared. "Mrs. Morgan, I've been looking everywhere for you," said Sam, the young security guard who had helped her the night of the gala. "Mr. Morgan is asking for your presence back at the meeting." Amanda froze, her expression shifting instantly to professional courtesy. "Sam, I was just helping Elizabeth find her way. She seemed confused." "I'll take care of Mrs. Morgan," Sam said firmly, offering Elizabeth his arm. "Ms. Winters, I believe you're needed in the media room. Something about press releases." Amanda hesitated, clearly frustrated by the interruption, but unable to object without raising suspicion. "Of course, we'll continue our chat later." "Elizabeth." Once Amanda had departed, Sam quickly led Elizabeth toward a service elevator. "We need to get you out of here now. Mrs. Morgan, that woman was waiting outside the office for you to come out." "Thank you, Sam," Elizabeth said gratefully. "But how did you know Mr. Crawford's security team contacted me?" Sam explained as they descended to the ground floor. "I've been keeping an eye on things from the inside. Not all of us approve of how Mr. Morgan has been treating you." As they reached a side entrance, Sam handed Elizabeth a small device. "The security cameras for this exit will go dark for exactly 60 seconds when you press this button. Your brother's car is waiting at the south gate." Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "You're risking your job." Sam smiled sadly. "Some things are more important than a paycheck. Mrs. Morgan, my mother was in a situation like yours once. No one helped her." Minutes later, Elizabeth was safely in Alexander's waiting car, clutching her purse containing the precious evidence. "Amanda threatened me," she told Alexander and David as they drove away. "She implied they were planning to stage an accident." Alexander's expression turned thunderous. "That settles it. We move now. Not next week. No more subtle approach." He turned to David. "Activate Protocol Omega. I want everything in place for the gala." Elizabeth looked between them. "What's Protocol Omega? What gala?" "Maxwell's hosting another charity gala next week," Alexander explained. "The annual Commitment to Community event where he parades his philanthropy before his wealthy friends." "It's the perfect battleground," David added. "Public, documented, with media present." Elizabeth felt a surge of determination as she patted her purse containing the USB drive. Then let's make it a night Maxwell Morgan will never forget. The ballroom of the Grand Morgan Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewelry of New York's elite. Maxwell Morgan stood at the center of it all, Amanda discreetly by his side, as he charmed potential donors and business partners alike. If he was concerned about the absence of his pregnant wife or the rumors surrounding their separation, he showed no sign of it. "Another magnificent event. Maxwell," gushed the wife of a hedge fund manager. "Though we miss seeing Elizabeth. How is she doing with the pregnancy?" Maxwell adopted a concerned expression. "She's resting under excellent care. The doctors assure me both she and the baby are doing well, but these last months require caution." "Such a devoted husband," the woman simpered, completely taken in by his performance. As Maxwell continued his practiced routine of false concern, the ballroom doors opened. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd as Elizabeth entered, radiant in a floor-length gown of deep emerald that elegantly draped her pregnant figure. Her hair swept up to reveal diamond earrings that caught the light. But it wasn't her unexpected appearance alone that caused the stir. Beside her, Tall and imposing, in a perfectly tailored black suit, stood Alexander Crawford, and flanking them were several serious-looking men and women who were clearly not typical gala attendees. Maxwell's practiced smile faltered momentarily before he recovered, handing his champagne flute to Amanda and moving to intercept them. "Elizabeth," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "what a wonderful surprise. I wasn't sure you'd feel up to attending." He leaned in as if to kiss her cheek, whispering harshly, "What the hell are you doing?" Elizabeth stepped back, avoiding his touch. "I wouldn't miss your favorite event, Maxwell, especially since it might be your last." Before Maxwell could respond, Alexander stepped forward, extending his hand. "Morgan, I believe you and I have some business to discuss." Maxwell reluctantly shook his hand, his knuckles white. "Crawford, this is hardly the venue for business discussions." "On the contrary," Alexander replied smoothly, "I think your donors would be very interested in exactly how their generous contributions are being managed." A flicker of alarm crossed Maxwell's face. "If you'll excuse us," he said to the curious onlookers, steering Alexander and Elizabeth toward a quieter corner. Amanda quickly joined them, her face a mask of controlled panic. "Whatever game you're playing, it ends now," Maxwell hissed once they were relatively private. "You're making a scene at my event." "Your event?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "I think you'll find the ownership situation has changed slightly." Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? For the past month, I've been quietly acquiring shares in Morgan Luxury Resorts through various shell companies," Alexander explained, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. "As of this morning, I control 51% of the voting shares." The blood drained from Maxwell's face. "That's impossible. Family Trust holds controlling interest." "It did," Alexander agreed, "until 3 board members, coincidentally, ones with children who work at companies I own, decided to sell their shares. Apparently, they were concerned about some troubling financial indicators." Maxwell's shock quickly turned to fury. "You can't just walk in and take my company." "Our company now," Alexander corrected. "And my first act as majority shareholder will be calling for a complete audit of the Morgan Charitable Foundation." Amanda stepped closer to Maxwell, her voice urgent. "He's bluffing. He can't have acquired that much without us knowing." "Oh, I'm not bluffing, Miss Winters," Alexander said pleasantly. "And speaking of knowing things, would you like to explain the offshore accounts you and Maxwell have been using to divert foundation funds? Or perhaps the fraudulent labor certifications for the resorts in Thailand and Belize?" Maxwell grabbed Alexander's arm, his voice a dangerous whisper. "You have no proof of any of this." "Actually," Elizabeth interjected, opening her clutch and removing a small black USB drive, "we have quite a lot of proof, including evidence that you and Amanda were planning to defraud investors by selling properties with known structural defects before they became public." Maxwell's eyes locked on the USB drive, recognition dawning. "You broke into my safe. Your safe in my home," Elizabeth countered. "The home you threw me out of while I was carrying your child. Is there a problem here?" A distinguished older man approached, Judge William Harrington, a longtime friend of Maxwell's family and a major donor to the foundation. "No problem, Judge." Maxwell recovered quickly. "Just a family disagreement." "Actually, Your Honor," Alexander said respectfully, "we were just discussing some concerning financial irregularities in the Morgan Foundation. As a prominent donor, I'm sure you'd be interested." The judge looked surprised. "Financial irregularities. What sort of irregularities?" "Alexander," Maxwell warned, "think very carefully about your next words." But it was Elizabeth who spoke. "Tax fraud, money laundering, and misappropriation of charitable donations, for starters." She turned to the judge. "Did you know that less than 30% of donations actually reach the causes they're intended for? The rest disappears into offshore accounts controlled by Maxwell and his partner." She nodded toward Amanda. The judge looked troubled. "These are serious allegations. Maxwell—" "Completely unfounded," Maxwell insisted. "My wife is unwell, Pregnancy hormones have affected her judgment. Perhaps we should let the SEC and the IRS determine that, Alexander suggested, nodding to one of the serious-looking men who had accompanied them, now revealed as a federal agent. Maxwell's face contorted with rage. You brought federal agents to my gala. They were very interested in the contents of your private records, Elizabeth said quietly, holding up the USB drive. Particularly the ones detailing how you've been systematically defrauding your investors and exploiting workers in developing countries. Maxwell lunged for the drive, but Alexander smoothly stepped between them. Around the room, guests had begun to notice the confrontation, and whispers spread rapidly. It's over. Maxwell, Alexander said firmly. You can do this quietly, with some dignity and tact, or we can make it very public. Your choice. For a moment, it seemed Maxwell might choose violence. Then, his survival instincts kicked in. What do you want? A fair divorce settlement for Elizabeth, Alexander stated. Full medical coverage for her and the baby, the house in Connecticut, and $20 million in liquid assets. Ridiculous, Maxwell scoffed. The prenup clearly limits. The prenup becomes invalid when you violate its fidelity clause, Rachel interjected, stepping forward with documents in hand. Not to mention the evidence of coercion in how it was presented to Elizabeth. Maxwell's jaw tightened. And if I agree to these terms, then we handle the company's irregularities internally. Alexander said, no public scandal, no criminal charges. You're blackmailing me, Maxwell realized. I'm offering you a way out, Alexander corrected. More than you deserve. Before Maxwell could respond, commotion erupted across the ballroom. Federal agents were now visible at all exits, and a senior agent was approaching with purpose. Mr. Morgan, the agent said formally, I'm Special Agent Donovan with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. The ballroom fell silent as guests watched in shock. Maxwell stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. This isn't over, he managed to say to Alexander and Elizabeth as agents moved to handcuff him. Actually, it is, Elizabeth replied with quiet dignity. But your child will know that I tried to give you a chance to do the right thing. As Maxwell and a similarly arrested Amanda were escorted from the ballroom, camera flashes erupted from the media who had been tipped off about the event. Tomorrow's headlines were already writing themselves. Billionaire hotel magnate arrested at own charity gala. In the chaos that followed, Alexander guided Elizabeth to a quiet anteroom where she could sit down. The confrontation had taken its toll, and she placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling the baby kick vigorously. Are you okay? Alexander asked, concern evident in his voice. Elizabeth took a deep breath. Yes, for the first time in a long time, I think I really am. Rachel joined them, her expression triumphant. The board members are in shock. 3 have already approached me offering their resignation and cooperation with any investigation. And the foundation, Elizabeth asked. We'll need new leadership, Rachel replied meaningfully. Someone with integrity who understands its true purpose. Alexander squeezed his sister's shoulder. Someone like you. Perhaps, once the baby comes and you're ready. Elizabeth looked surprised. Me after everything that's happened. Especially after everything that's happened. Alexander affirmed. Who better to rebuild it with actual transparency and purpose? As they discussed the future, David entered with an update. Maxwell's being processed downtown. His lawyers are already scrambling. But with the evidence we provided and several board members turning state's evidence, he's facing serious time. And the company, Alexander asked, stock will take a hit when this goes public. But our team is prepared with a restructuring plan that separates the legitimate operations from Maxwell's schemes. The Morgan name might need to go, though. Elizabeth nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time for a new name anyway. A fresh start. As they prepared to leave, Elizabeth paused to look back at the ballroom where Maxwell had reigned supreme just an hour earlier. He really believed he was untouchable, she mused, that the rules didn't apply to him. Men like Maxwell always do, Alexander replied. Their greatest weakness is their absolute certainty in their own invincibility. Elizabeth rested her hands on her belly, feeling a powerful kick from within. Well, my little one, it seems you won't be carrying the Morgan name after all, but you'll have something far more valuable, a family who fights for what's right, no matter the cost. 1 year later, Elizabeth sat on the sun deck of her beach house, watching the waves crash against the shore while her 9-month-old daughter Olivia giggled in her bouncer. The Connecticut property, once a reluctant consolation prize in Maxwell's mind, had become a true home, filled with warmth and laughter. There's my favorite girl, Alexander called as he stepped onto the deck, carrying a tray of lemonade. He set it down and immediately scooped up Olivia, who squealed with delight as her uncle swung her gently in the air. Careful, Elizabeth laughed. She just had lunch. Are you warning me or her? Alexander grinned, settling into a chair with Olivia on his lap. How's the book coming along? Elizabeth glanced at her laptop. Almost finished. The publisher is pushing for a summer release. The book, The Rising from the Ashes, How I Survived a Billionaire's Betrayal, had started as therapy, but evolved into something more, a guide for women trapped in emotionally abusive relationships with powerful men. Early reviews were calling it revolutionary and empowering. And the foundation? Alexander asked, making faces at Olivia. Thriving, Elizabeth replied with justified pride. Our new transparency policies have actually increased donations, and we've expanded our education initiatives to 15 more countries. The Morgan Foundation, now renamed the Phoenix Foundation, had been completely restructured under Elizabeth's leadership. With all traces of Maxwell's corruption excised, it had become a model of charitable effectiveness, with over 80% of donations now reaching their intended recipients. Have you seen the latest? Alexander pulled out his phone, showing Elizabeth a news article. Former hotel magnate Maxwell Morgan denied appeal, will serve full 12-year sentence. Elizabeth read aloud. I'm surprised he's still fighting. Men like Maxwell don't know how to accept defeat, Alexander observed. How does it make you feel? Elizabeth considered the question. Oddly empty. I thought I'd feel vindication or satisfaction, but mostly I just feel free, like he's become irrelevant to my life. Alexander nodded, understanding. And Amanda, 3 years for conspiracy, though she'll likely serve less with good behavior. Elizabeth replied. Her testimony against Maxwell earned her leniency. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Olivia play with Alexander's tie. Oh, I almost forgot, Alexander said suddenly. Dr. James called while you were working. He wanted to confirm your dinner plans for Saturday. Elizabeth blushed slightly. It's just a friendly dinner. Alexander teased. The third friendly dinner this month with your pediatrician. He's good with Olivia, Elizabeth defended, though her smile gave her away. Dr. James Harrington, no relation to the judge, but ironically the son of Maxwell's former friends, had entered their lives when Olivia had developed colic at 3 months. His gentle manner, genuine concern, and complete lack of interest in Elizabeth's high-profile divorce had been refreshing. Their friendship had evolved naturally, with James never pushing for more than Elizabeth was ready to give. He's good with her mother, too, Alexander observed. And unlike a certain ex-brother-in-law of mine, he seems to value substance over status. Elizabeth couldn't argue with that. James had built his pediatric practice in a mixed-income neighborhood, accepting patients regardless of their insurance status. His passion for helping children came from a genuine place, not from how it might look on a society page. Speaking of business, Elizabeth changed the subject. How's the Morgan acquisition going? After Maxwell's arrest, Morgan Luxury Resorts had been thrown into chaos. Alexander, true to his word, had used his controlling interest to stabilize the company, protect the employees' jobs, and implement ethical business practices. The company, renamed Crawford Hospitality Group, was slowly rebuilding its reputation. Better than expected, Alexander replied. The rebranding is complete at most properties, and occupancy rates are climbing again. The labor reforms at the international properties have actually improved service quality. And the structural issues at the newer resorts, all addressed, cost us a fortune, but it was the right thing to do. Alexander tickled Olivia's chin. Your mommy taught me that sometimes doing the right thing costs more up front, but pays dividends in the long run. Elizabeth smiled. I think it was the other way around. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by Olivia's happy babbling. Elizabeth found herself reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past year, from desperate, pregnant, and abandoned to confident, purposeful, and stronger than she'd ever been. I received a letter from Maxwell, she said suddenly, forwarded through his attorneys. Alexander straightened, instantly protective. When? Yesterday. He wants to see Olivia when she's older, says he's reflected on his choices and wants to be a father to his child. That's not happening, Alexander declared firmly. It's not my decision alone, Elizabeth replied thoughtfully. Someday, it will be partly Olivia's choice too. Lizzie, after everything he did. I know, she interrupted gently. And I'm not saying yes. I'm just saying that I've learned hatred is as much a prison as fear was. I won't let Maxwell control any part of my life anymore, not even through resentment. Alexander studied his sister with newfound respect. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between having my heart broken and putting it back together again, she answered with a small smile. Besides, Olivia has the best uncle in the world. She doesn't need a father who sees her as a business asset. As if understanding she was the topic of conversation, Olivia reached out for her mother. Elizabeth took her, breathing in the sweet baby scent of her daughter's hair. You know what I realized recently, she said softly. If Maxwell hadn't been so cruel that night at the gala, if he'd been just a little more careful to maintain his facade, I might still be trapped in that marriage, raising Olivia in a home without real love. Sometimes our worst moments lead us to our best lives, Alexander observed. Exactly. Elizabeth kissed Olivia's forehead. So in a strange way, I'm grateful. Not to him, but for the journey that brought me here. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted their conversation. Moments later, Rachel appeared on the deck, waving a folder triumphantly. It's official, she announced. The divorce is absolutely, unequivocally final. Maxwell signed the last paperwork from prison yesterday. Elizabeth felt a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying lift from her shoulders. So I'm officially Elizabeth Crawford again. Unless you want to keep Morgan for professional reasons, Rachel replied. Elizabeth shook her head firmly. No, Crawford was always who I really was. I just forgot for a while. Rachel pulled a bottle of champagne from her bag. Then let's toast to Elizabeth Crawford, author, foundation director, amazing mother, and the woman who brought down a billionaire. As they celebrated, Elizabeth's phone chimed with a news alert. She checked it and let out a surprised laugh. What is it? Alexander asked. Elizabeth showed them the screen. Billionaire's ex-wife transforms scandal into success. Phoenix Foundation named most effective charity by nonprofit Watchdog. Now that, Rachel declared as she poured the champagne, is what I call the perfect revenge. Not revenge, Elizabeth corrected, looking at her daughter with infinite tenderness. Redemption. Later that evening, after Olivia was asleep and her guests had departed, Elizabeth stood on the beach behind her house, watching the stars emerge over the ocean. She thought about the frightened, heartbroken woman who had stood in the rain outside her mansion a year ago, and marveled at the distance she had traveled since that night. Maxwell had tried to break her, but instead, he had forced her to discover her true strength. He had tried to isolate her, but instead, he had reminded her of the power of genuine connection. He had tried to define her worth by his standards, but instead, he had freed her to recognize her own value. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. Still on for Saturday, Olivia-approved restaurant has high chairs and ice cream. Elizabeth smiled as she typed her reply. Absolutely. Olivia says ice cream is mandatory. As she walked back toward the warmly lit house, Elizabeth felt a profound sense of peace. The path ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time in years, it was truly her path, chosen freely, walked proudly, and shared with people who valued her for exactly who she was. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all.